You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts.
All right, Black and White Sports supporters. Well, don't look now, but President Trump has saved college football. That's right. We know that it's not been that long ago, maybe a month ago, 6 weeks ago. He huddled up with some of the biggest names in sports, not just college sports, but in sports in general. Most notably, former Alabama coach Nick Saban and several of the commissioners of various conferences in the NCAA got together and said, you know what we don't want anymore? We don't want no more Diego Pavias. Nah, we're done with that. How about no more 7 years worth of college? How about we don't let guys transfer 77 times? Not literally, but yeah, I mean, good God, there's guys out there that transferred 4 or 5 times. Seemed like it had gotten ridiculous. It was the Wild West in college sports, and something had to be done. Well, something was done. President Trump signed an executive order to save college football. Aims to limit NCAA athletes to 5 years and 1 transfer. Guys, we're finally going to be back to once you get familiar with a player, you can actually wrap your arms around him and expect for him to stay at your university for the most part. For the most part. Now, will this get legally challenged? Of course. Of course it will. We know how this goes. There are going to be all kinds of frivolous lawsuits out there, as there are with every executive order, depending on who's, we know, based on their political alliances. Oh, let's file a lawsuit. I think this one actually had bipartisan support. It'll still get sued. ESPN. President Donald Trump signed an executive order Friday designed to limit how long athletes can play college sports and how often they transfer between schools. The order directs the NCAA to create rules that mandate college athletes play for no more than a 5-year period and allows them to transfer schools only once before they graduate without having to sit out a season. So if they decide they're going to change, you're going to have to sit out a year. Yeah. The rule changes are scheduled to go into effect August 1. A school that plays an athlete who doesn't meet these new limits could risk losing its federal funding. Uh-oh. Schools aren't going to be, they're not going to be trying to fight this too much. The order also states the NCAA should update its rules to create a national register for players' agents and create policies that prevent schools from cutting scholarships or other opportunities for women's and Olympic sports in order to pay their athletes. How about that? Oh, wow. That's good stuff. Quote, college sports cannot function without a clear, agreed-upon rules concerning pay for play and player eligibility that can't endlessly be challenged in court, as is the case now, the White House said in a released news statement. Multiple lawyers who work for colleges and their athletes told ESPN they believe judges would rule the president's order to be unconstitutional and unenforceable and challenged in court. It's going to depend on where it's at, of course. We all know that. What state it happens in. The NCAA president, Charlie Baker, said in media availability in Phoenix before the women's Final Four that he did not read the entire executive order yet, but from what he saw on social media, quote, there's a bunch of things in there that are pretty consistent with the things we've talked to them and Congress about. That's the thing. The NCAA wants this to happen. We need congressional action to sort of seal the deal on a number of things, which is good because we do, and we are getting bipartisan agreement on a number of those issues, and it would be a really big thing, Baker said. Based on our own conversation, a lot of Democrats and Republicans in Washington over the course of the past month or two, I do believe there's a lot of common ground there. And asked why the NCAA needs an executive order to solve its issues, Baker said, on some of these issues, it's hard for us to do without at least some support from the feds. The courts are one way to settle the debate, but it takes a really long time and it creates a lot of uncertainty. Trump acknowledged that his administration would likely be sued when he first mentioned his plans for an executive order during a roundtable with college sports leaders in early March. Trump has used the threat of pulling federal funds from universities as a negotiating tactic as an effort to enforce other policies during his second term. In September, a federal judge prevented the Trump administration from withholding federal funds from Harvard as a punishment for the university's decision not to comply with an executive order related to alleged anti-Semitic behavior on campus. Is it a surprise that some judge ruled against that? Of course not. Wow. Trump has expressed interest in helping college sports industry find its balance multiple times in the past year. Several dozen college sports leaders joined Trump and other sports executives at the White House at a roundtable in early March. So, something to think about on this is that I got to tell you, it couldn't keep going like it was. I saw somebody say, oh, so we're telling kids where they can work now. Well, it's college sports. Okay? This is not, you're not going to work for a regular job. And look, everybody knows that. You just got people trying to be smartasses out there. Okay? You're still going to a learning institution. Let's not get confused. All right? So, there's that aspect. So you better be sure where you want to go to school. Now, do I think there should be some changes in other ways too? I do believe that you should be allowed to transfer, and I've said this before, if the coach that recruited you leaves and decides he's taking another job. But that's another thing that something needs to happen with. It needs to become like the NFL, where coaches are not allowed to negotiate new contracts or leave for another job as long as they're under contract with another school. That's something that needs to change. By God, some of these coaches should have to fucking stay. Honor your contract. That is the one thing I will say the NFL gets done right. Is there's not, look, are there talks with other coaches behind the scenes? Yeah, but if your coach quits and wants to get hired by somebody else, well, guess what? You're going to have to trade for that coach. Now, I don't know how that would work in college sports, but you get my point. I mean, we got to do something about and we got to do something about coaches leaving before the end of the playoffs. All right? I mean, that's bullshit. It's unfair to the kids. It's unfair to the school. And I don't know. Something has to be done better there. You're going to have to alter some of the transfer dates. You're going to have to alter some of the recruiting dates. There's got to be some changes to the calendar. All right. So it's not all just, this still isn't perfect yet. All right. There's other things that's got to be done. But it's a hell of a good first step. Sorry, Diego. You're not, I will say this, though. If I'm Ty Simpson, I'm suing the NC2A to turn my ass around and go back to college. Like, I do not feel like until you are literally drafted that you should have to go to the NFL. You can declare for the NFL. You can go to combine. You can go through the whole damn process. But if on the day of the draft you decide, fuck it, I want to go back to school, and you got eligibility left, you should be able to go back to school. You know? And I think now that it looks like he's going in the second round instead of the first round, if I'm him, I'm going back to school. Because guess what? You may have a great year and you may find yourself in the top 10 next year. And if you just have another solid year, you're going to go in the second round like you were going to go or not, whether you have all them other quarterbacks coming out anyway. So that's the one thing. We heard rumors that Shedeur and Quinn Ewers almost went back to school and just challenged the system. That's coming from a player, by the way. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
Thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next time on Black and White Sports.